Hey guys, FilthyRobot here, bringing you another guides, tips, and tricks video, and this time we are talking about China. How good is China? So let's take a look at their bonuses. Starting off, let's take a look at the first Emperor bonus. When building ancient and classical wonders, you may spend builder charges to complete 15% of the original wonder cost. Builders receive an additional charge. There's two really interesting components to this bonus. This is a quite decent, if not exceptionally good, bonus as a whole. First of all, the builders receive an additional charge. It's just an all-around awesome boost for the entirety of the game for your builders, which is just very, very useful to have. One extra builder means you can trigger the early Eurekas or the early inspirations, like improve 3 tiles, and still have a worker charge left over, either for a chop or for a new city or for whatever else you want to do, an extra luxury or something like this, something that you wouldn't normally improve early or don't have the tech to improve early, because some techs like irrigation are quite slow to get, where you're probably going to have passed the time in your tech path, your Civ6 tech path. You're probably going to have past craftsmanship by the time you have irrigation picked up, because it's just a little bit slow otherwise. So this allows you to do things with that first worker that other civilizations can't do, as well as being useful throughout the course of the game and just having more overall builder charges compared to other civilizations. Really like that bonus, that portion of it straight up. However, that's not even the most interesting part of this bonus. The most interesting part is definitely the production boost, or the builders being able to complete portions of wonders in the ancient and classical era. There's some really powerful early game wonders that this directly impacts. I'm thinking of Petra, which is in this game a classical era wonder, which means that Petra is a very situational wonder that's going to give massive bonuses to desert tiles, particularly desert hill tiles, but it's only really available to be built in cities with a lot of desert, only worthwhile to be built in cities with a lot of desert. And the really cool function of this, the really cool portion of this, is that generally when you build a wonder, you want a lot of production to do that, and you just don't have a lot of production in expands compared to capital. Capital gets the both the initial bonuses for having the palace, which are production and growth bonuses, as well as just having the bonuses of being around for a much longer period of time than expands do. The fact that and if you can't really spend all that much time placing your capital, you're gonna be settling that within a couple turns of starting the game. Can't really move around to optimize desert placement, and desert tiles are very, very weak to begin with, meaning that even if you did optimize the placement of your capital for the biggest Petra, you're probably surrounding yourself with a lot of very weak tiles in the early game. Makes it very, very difficult to get the resources out to invest to actually get something like Petra. So for me, these bonuses are particularly cool for expands, where the expand is going to generally be weaker than the capital and generally wouldn't want to be a position that you'd want a city that you'd want to build a wonder in. But because of this bonus, you're actually able to very rapidly and very efficiently complete wonders in cities that are going to benefit more from that based on their terrain, but might not have been able to build that otherwise. I think that is so awesomely cool. It's probably good it doesn't scale all the way through the other eras, because it's an extremely powerful ability that allows you to absolutely prioritize early game wonders in a way you can't do as any other civilization. I really like it. I've had a lot of fun building Petra as China and taking full advantage of those builders rushing those the wonders for me. However, it doesn't scale all the way through the rest of the game, so probably not super powerful. Clearly in the later and mid game, that's not such a big deal. But as I say repeatedly in these videos, early game bonuses that trigger and help you in the early game are going to be more impactful as a whole to your game than bonuses that don't trigger until the late game. So early, and in general, an early game wonder building bonus is just going to be straight up better than a mid or late game wonder building bonus, even if they're of equal value in terms of their strength. So I really like this ability. I think it's awesome for China. You're going to find all sorts of situational wonders you can do things with. I haven't even begun to experiment with how this helps out with religion, but there are a lot of very bizarre placement restrictions on some of the religious wonders. Things like have to be on marshes or have to be next to blah blah blah. The wonders in general in Civilization 6 have a lot more placement restriction than ever before. So clearly in Civ 5 there were no placement restrictions in terms of they're built in the city center only, but there were things like had to be near a mountain or have to be near the coast or this type of stuff. But there are a ton more of those restrictions in Civilization 6, and particularly I want to show you one of the craziest ones for me in terms of the actual placement restrictions. The Great Zimbabwe, and this requires down here requires it be, where's the actual right here, must be built adjacent to a commercial hub district with a market and adjacent to a cattle, which is just what Like what a bizarre restriction for a wonder. So anyways, but my point of that is, as China, you're uniquely able to deal with these crazy wonder restrictions in a way that other civs can't, because other civs are going to be like, okay, I do have a city with a market in my current commerce district that also has an adjacent cattle, but that city has no production because it's like my 7th city and it's just not a great city, and I settled it 7th and last and it hasn't had a lot of time to develop, and I want to build the great Zimbabwe, I guess, if you ever wanted to build that wonder. And I really wanted to build this wonder, but I just can't because the situation really doesn't allow me to do that in any sort of reasonable amount of time. Well, China's got your answer for that, which is pretty damn cool. All right, moving on. The Dynastic Cycle. Eureka's and inspirations provide 60% of civics and technologies instead of 50%. I don't really like this bonus. On paper, it sounds kind of good. It basically means when you trigger Eurekas or inspirations, you're getting more of a culture boost or more of a science boost than you are as another civ. The problem is really how those are triggered. A lot of time in the early game in particular, a lot of your time is spent avoiding completing technologies. So let's say, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to maximize your science or culture. So let's say I know I want bronze working, I know I want archery, and I know I want writing and irrigation. Probably not writing, but let's say bronze working, archery, and horseback riding. I know I'm going to be going to war early, and I want to get my archers out, I want to get my encampments out, and I want to get my horsemen out. All right, that's fairly reasonable. That will happen in games that you're playing. What this tends to be is it tends to be a game of avoiding finishing the tech. You don't want to finish archery because it's a really easy to acquire boost to kill a unit with a slinger. So you tech archery halfway up, it gets to halfway and you quickly change off of it because you don't want to waste that free science you're going to get from killing a unit with a slinger. Meanwhile, your slinger is out hunting barbarians. You're trying to get 3 barbarian kills. You tech bronze working up to half, and you don't want to finish bronze work. You don't want to waste the science you could have for free by finishing bronze working, so you tech it up to half. And then you start teching for horseback riding. You probably already built that pasture, so probably there's less of a impetus to avoid that entirely, but you got the boost off that. And meanwhile, your worry is you don't want to trigger the classical era quite yet, because you want to make sure you get all the time you can to complete your first round of city-state quests before you have to get your second round of city-state quests. So you're teching these things while simultaneously avoiding teching a lot of the ones, especially the ones with the easier bonuses, and there's a lot of them. Mining a resource is a very easy bonus. Farming a resource tends to be a fairly reasonable bonus to acquire. Finding a natural wonder happens almost always in every game you're playing, sooner or later. Meeting another civ always happens. Building a quarry tends to happen a hell of a lot. Sending a trader out, hell of a lot. Building an iron mine, hell of a lot. In other words, all these bonuses are essentially there, and they're going to be easy to get or likely to happen in a pretty reasonable time frame in almost all the games you're doing. And this means you play a game of avoidance. I don't want to finish masonry, I don't want to waste it. I want to finish bronze work, and I don't want to waste that science. And the problem is, it's already challenging enough to A, remember to do that, and to B, to work out exactly when to change off of that with 50%. And 50% is really visually easy to use. Right, you can very, very quickly tell with your drop-down menu when you're teching something. If we were to end turn here, let's just do that for the sake of this. Okay, fortify, end turn. If you were to do that for the sake of it, you can very easily see visually when you're going to approach 50%, when that's going to be. 60% starts getting, or 40% seems to start getting a little bit harder. We're talking somewhere around there. It's going to be basically, the problem I have with this bonus is probably the vast majority of the time, particularly in the early game, and you guys know what I think about early game bonuses compared to late game bonuses. In the early game in particular, most of this is probably going to be wasted. It's going to be difficult to hit those, to time those compared to 50%. It's going to be difficult to really min-max that. Yeah, the stuff that happens ahead of time, so like some of the later game ones, if you're building 3 workshops and that triggers the Eureka for industrialization, you're probably going to get that boost, and that will be nice for the late game stuff where it's a little bit less pressed on time to do those. Build 2 banks, build 2 neighborhoods, own 3 musketmen, stuff like this in the late game that is a little, that you have some time in between turns to really plan your tech path. That might become a little bit stronger in those eras. But in the early game, I don't even think that bonus is very good. Late game, yes. Early game, not so much. It is, however, a both science and a cultural boost, those being 2 of the most important types of resources you have in the game. So there is something to be said for that. But I just think in the early game in particular, it's going to be very, very difficult to use this. And most of the time, that's going to be wasted in the early game. Now, I'm sure some of you will disagree, but that's my take on this particular bonus. All right, let's talk about the Crouching Tiger units. This is an interesting unit. It's available at crossbows, just like it doesn't show up till machinery, which is a medieval era unit. The comparison to look at would be the crossbow. The crossbow is a 40 combat strength unit with 2 range and 30 melee strength. The Crouching Tiger is a 50 combat strength, range combat strength unit with 30 combat strength melee, but only 1 range. That's the difference. The production is actually a little bit cheaper for the Crouching Tiger. Same era, so same upkeep. Also a ranged class unit, so it's going to get the same types of production bonuses from production cards. But nothing upgrades into it. One of the things you often see with crossbows is those archers you built early to trigger the Eureka moments, A for archery and then B for crossbow Eureka, which is own 3 archers, can be upgraded very easily and readily into crossbows. You're going to have to hard build your Crouching Tigers instead. What I think the Crouching Tiger is going to be exceptional at is defending cities. I think it's going to be a unit that you end up putting in encampments on the front line and putting in cities when you're being attacked on a defensive role. And I think it's going to excel in that role. 50 combat strength is a lot. Since the last round of these videos, I record these 7 at a time, so I record a week at a time for these. Since this is round 2 of those videos, since I've last recorded videos, there's been a lot of comments talking about the combat system. Apparently, basically plus or minus 30 combat strength is around, I believe, a one-shot. Now, I might not be entirely right about that. I still haven't seen this directly in action. But in other words, the absolute unit strength relative to each other is very important. And that difference, what's the word I'm looking for? The magnitude of about 30 is going to be where you're looking at to see one-shots, which is pretty big. So in other words, a 10 combat boost is fairly significant, much more so than I was giving it credit to before, because it's not just a percent-based thing, it's actually a relative to the unit you're fighting with. So 50 compared to 40 is actually quite a lot of increased combat strength comparatively. And if you look at the other things you're fighting in this era, a knight is 48 combat strength, crossbow's only 40, so Crouching Tiger being 50 puts it up in strength comparison with the knight's damage. Pikeman comes in at 41, and you'll see some... Yeah, what's the next tier of units? Next tier of units, you're going to be seeing things like muskets at 55, which means that this unit is comparable to both the medieval era knights and then later on the Renaissance era musketmen. Not quite comparable, but still fairly comparable in strength. In other words, this is going to be a super powerful defending unit. I think you're going to have a much harder time using it on offense. One range is a very big restriction. The same problem I had with Sokka horse archers, which are it's very difficult to use a one range unit. And this is a one range unit that is not very mobile, only has 2 movement strength, and it doesn't have any additional melee strength. So if you do start using Crouching Tigers as an offensive unit, melee units slamming into them are going to trigger the melee defense as opposed to the range defense when the Crouching Tiger is defending, which means that knights are going to crush him, because knights are 18 combat strength higher in terms of damage, and knights are very, very efficient already versus attacking into crossbows, for example. So overall, I think a mediocre unit, going to be very good on defense, but not so great on offense, and going to be particularly useful for defending fortified areas like encampments, cities, and possibly things like Great Wall tiles. Which brings us to our final bonus of China. The Great Wall, unique tile improvement. Let's take a look at what exactly it does. And we can talk about those bonuses here. Unlocks the builder ability to construct the Great Wall unique to China. It unlocks at masonry, so it's going to be fairly early in the tree, right about here. So it's fairly early on. And let's go have a look at the Great Wall again. Provides an increase to defense, and the bonus that it does for that, this is actually a fort. It gives the same bonus as a fort, if I understand correctly. And let's just look those up. I believe that's +4, but I want to double check. Yep. Okay. So straight up 4 defense for being on that tile, as well as bonus to gold if adjacent to other segments. Additional culture and tourism as you advance your technology tree, and must be built along the lines of the borders of your empire. This last one seems to be a load of crap as far as I can tell. My actual understanding is you can build these pretty much anywhere in your empire. I haven't seen restrictions on the tiles I was able to build the Great Wall stuff. Perhaps I have just not encountered those restrictions, but it doesn't actually seem to be true. I don't actually think these are going to be a tile that you want to work very often. Those bonuses are not strong enough. +1 gold if adjacent to other segments isn't that great. So just having +1 gold as an improvement really isn't a very powerful improvement in terms of the value of the tiles that you care about, right? You really care about in the early game is production, and to a lesser degree growth, and then probably culture, and then maybe science, and then maybe faith, and then maybe gold. In other words, this is giving the weakest of the bonuses that we actually care about. And it's not giving very much of those, and it takes the tile improvement. So you can't improve a farm and a Great Wall segment on that. So I don't think you're going to be planting Great Wall segments because you care about the gold bonus. Maybe later in the very late game, maybe the culture and tourism will become relevant if you build a ton of these and you just use 1 billion worker charges to build 1 billion Great Wall segments and you're trying to max tourism. Maybe. I haven't had a strategy. I haven't had a chance to test that strategy, but perhaps it could be more impactful then. But I don't think you're going to see these tiles being tiles you actually care about working. What I think you're actually going to want it for is those bonuses. So let's go take a look at the fort bonuses. Did it say that it counted as a fort? I was under the impression that it did, but now reading this, I'm not so sure. It says provides an increase to defense, bonus of gold. Yeah, it doesn't tell us directly here. Ooh, that's interesting. My understanding was it worked as a fort. And if it doesn't, and I'm sure chat, you guys will be able to, that the comments in the YouTube section here will be able to clear this up. But the way forts work is they give that 4 defense and they give the unit 2 turns of fortification. Fortification bonuses are +3 per turn. So on a fort, double fortified, and you get the double fortified bonus on a fort, that's 10 combat strength, which is a chunk. We just were talking about that earlier with the crouching tiger. That is the 10 is quite a lot, right? That's a decent sized combat bonus. So if the Great Wall is giving both the 2 turns of fortification and the 4 defense, that's quite a lot. If it's just giving the 4 defense or even maybe less, I guess it doesn't say it's a fort, although I took it to be acting as a fort. If it's giving a little bit less than that, it may not be quite as powerful as it is otherwise. As it is already, it's a situational defensive building. It's going to be extremely useful for putting near the tiles that you have an encampment on contested tiles, but especially rough terrain tiles where you already have fortified units getting the ideal terrain bonus on particular choke points. That's the type of tile you're going to want to place the Great Wall. And you're going to have access to whatever that bonus is, even if it is weaker than the fort bonus, you're still going to have access to that bonus well before anybody else has access to forts, which are all the way up at, I believe there was at castles. Let's find out. We just looked at that again. Done this like 3 times now. Thought it was castles, but let's take a look. Fort. Available at Siege Tactics. Where are Siege Tactics? Let's find out. Siege Tactics, which are required technology castles, and this is a, yeah, okay, so it is down that way. So you're gonna have to have castles to get the siege technology stuff that you're gonna need to actually build forts. Does it say in here? And this is actually interesting, one of the places where the Great Wall gets boosted. In other words, you're going to have the bonuses towards defense well before any other civilization is going to as China. So what do I think overall, these bonuses combined? Well, this is an early game bonus right here, as well as an across the entire course of the game bonus, which I like. They're both strong bonuses. These bonuses are weak in the early game, in my opinion, but stronger across the course of the game, and they're okay. It's not a huge increase, but it is meaningful that this essentially impacts to culture and science above and beyond what other civs get. This is a nice defensive unit that arrives in the medieval era and probably will scale into the Renaissance era, and the Great Wall is a defensive improvement that you can place on demand in locations that you want very, very early on in the game that later on potentially gives you some tourism output. Taken together, I think these bonuses are very strong. I think these this is going to make China more than capable of rushing wonders and expands to make the expands awesome. I'm thinking things like Petra. I'm thinking things like yeah, that type of terrain modifying stuff, any of the religious wonders potentially. And I think as a whole, these bonuses are going to treat China very, very well. I don't think this is like the top tier civ, but I think it's going to be a consistently powerful, consistently good civilization just based on these bonuses. Anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. We're doing a whole series on these. If you haven't checked them out already, definitely go check them out. We'll be doing all 20 civs as they stand now, and hopefully as new civs get added, we'll add those as well. If you enjoyed the content, please hit the subscribe button and check out both my content here on YouTube as well as my Twitch channel where I do live streaming, a lot of Civ 6 live streaming right now. Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.